Okay, today we're going to look at a few literal equations, or as they're now called, translating formulas. Here we have multiple variables in a situation here, and we have to solve for one of the variables, depending on the problem. So normally we're used to solving for x equals a number. Now we have a formula here. The first example has I, P, R, and T. So the first example we have here, Michael borrows money from his uncle, who is charging him simple interest using the formula I equals PRT. To figure out what the interest rate R is, Michael rearranges the formula to find R. His new formula is R equals what? So what they're asking us here is asking us to get R by itself. Okay, so if I were to make this smaller, we want to get R by itself there. Okay, I'm just going to rewrite the formula here. I equals PRT. So we have to use inverse operations to get the R value by itself. So our goal is to get this guy alone. We have to understand what's happening between the different variables here. So P, R, and T, letters that are next to each other, they are being multiplied. So if I were to use the inverse operation as a multiplication, I would be dividing here. So since I'm trying to get R by itself, I could divide by P and T at the same time. Now, since this is an equation, whatever I do to one side, I have to do the other. So since on the right-hand side, divided by PT, on the left-hand side, I'm also going to divide by PT. So if we take a look at the right-hand side, P divided by P divides out or cancels out. T divided by T divides out. And I'm just left with R on the right-hand side. I'm going to write it on the left since it is an equal sign. And we have I divided by PT. We have R by itself, so that is our final answer. Looking at one that's a little bit more difficult, volume of a cone is V equals 1/3 pi r squared h. The radius r of the cone may be expressed as what? So again, we are solving for r, getting r by itself in this equation. So if I were to rewrite this, 1/3 pi r squared h, my goal is to get this r by itself. What I tell my students first is to get rid of the fraction here. We could divide by 1/3, which is fine when we're dealing with just numbers, but since we are dealing with a formula here, I want to multiply by the reciprocal. So the reciprocal of 1/3 would be 3, or 3 over 1. Whatever to do to one side, I have to do the other. Sorry about that, 3 over 1. So on the left-hand side, we have 3v. On the right-hand side, the 1/3 and the 3 over 1, they multiplied out. It equals 1, so we don't need to write that. And we get pi r squared h. Similar to the above example, we're trying to get r by itself, so I can divide by pi and h in the same step. Whatever I do to one side, I have to do the other. On the right-hand side, the pi's cancel out, divide out, the h's divide out, and I'm left with 3v over pi h equals r squared. And here's where the tricky part comes in. A lot of students don't understand that squaring a number and square rooting a number are inverse operations. A lot of them will try dividing here. But in order to undo something that's being squared, we need to square root it. Whatever I do to one side, I have to do the other. On the right-hand side, squaring a number that's being square rooted cancels it out. And I'm left with r equals the square root, everything's underneath the square root, 3v over pi h. R's by itself, so there's my final answer. Nothing has changed with the steps here. The concepts are still the same. I'm using inverse operations to solve the equation. A lot of students just get confused because we're dealing just with letters now instead of numbers. But the steps remain the same. Okay, I divided what was being multiplied. Okay, I multiplied by the reciprocal. I divided, then I used a square root. So the concepts are still there. It shouldn't be that difficult to solve a translating formula following the steps that we learned about solving equations. Thanks, guys.